down 3 planes.
8 missions you were lucky, 10 somebody up there liked you, 25 was almost an impossibility.
The plane blew up and I got knocked out.
Welcome to Air Combat Journal. Today's journal entry features B-17 Bombardier Donald Butts. If you ever wondered what it was like to train as a bombardier, Don has you covered. He deployed overseas during the final days of the war and tells how the role of bombardier changed as the Allies got closer to victory. As an added bonus, Don's wife May weighs in on what it was like to be a young bride left at home while her husband was at war on the other side of the world. This is your pilot, John Sermon, asking you to strap in and sit back. Air Combat Journal is ready for takeoff.
I grew up in South Minneapolis on the east side of Lake Nokomis. Also on the east side of Lake Nokomis was the airport. In those days it was Shorty DuPonte who had a big hangar with airplanes in there. And I would wake up at my own home, which is not too far away, listening to the airplanes' engines. And I decided that sounds really interesting. So I went over and asked him, I said, is there any way I could fly in the big airplane? He says, can you sweep out a hangar? And I took this big, wide push and started pushing all the dust and the dirt out of the hangar. And I got through Shorty DuPonte, jumped in the airplane, and took the 2 other kids that were pushing dirt around. And we all went for a ride over Lake Nokomis and South Minneapolis and Roosevelt High School, Nokomis Junior High, Keewaydin and Grade School, all part of the steps. And so I was really interested in aviation. As a result of that, I decided when the war came on, I would get in. So I heard that the V-5 program, which was a Navy preparatory program, was taking place right there at that part of the airfield. I went to Iowa City, to the University of Iowa. So I started out in the Navy, and then I went into the Army Air Corps program because I had some deficiencies in my flight capabilities. The city, or not the city, but the capital of our Air Force was in Washington, D.C. They sent a letter out and said that everybody who washed out of the Navy program from that day forward would stay in the Navy and be a second-class seaman. Either that or we could sign a letter saying no. And so I said no, and I got out and I took the Navy experience with me and wrote this series of test questions about the 3 stages, the navigators, bombardiers, and pilots. I qualified very well with all 3. Decided to become a bombardier because the reason I washed out or had trouble in the Navy because of flight deficiency, practicing tail wheel landings, coming in too fast. And so I went into bombardier training, went to Childress, Texas. I finished training there and went to Sioux City, Iowa, trained with Bob Starkey, Joe Vanneman, and Sid Goshen. Tail Gutter became I can't remember his name, but he was a preacher after the war. We had interesting fellows there, as I've thought of many times. One of them was to become a movie star. One was an Army officer, a ground pounder, as we called him. He wanted to be a flyer. And we all completed the training. We were all assigned. I've got records of all of their assignments, every place they went to. I finished my training in Childress. And then I was assigned to a crew in Sioux City, Iowa. Interesting thing. I finished my training in with my crew. Starkey was the pilot, and the CO, or the commanding officer, in the ready room prior to our next mission said that Washington had said that every other bombardier would be taken off the crew. They let the armor or gunner, which was one of the crewmen, drop the bombs on a flip of a switch while keeping his eye on the lead plane. But he says, we got to make a choice. We got to take out every other bombardier. Heads who take even number, tails will take odd number. My crew number was 2378, which meant they took me off my crew. My crew went overseas afterwards. This was about close to the end of the war, but we didn't have any structure that we'd been with for a long time. It just so happened that my crew left and went overseas, and Roofs and his crew, they were in the 33rd mission over Germany. They were heading for Germany. They were over the North Sea. There was a pocket of German anti-aircraft guns in Poland. They fired one shell, hit my former crew, dropped him in the North Sea. And it was a heartbreaking thing. He was from Winstead, Minnesota. Roofs was handsome to no end as to attractiveness was concerned. So my crew was shot down. I was not with them because of the flip of a coin. I had a similar experience where my navigator pulled on my pants leg when I was sticking my head up high looking out of the Astrodome, checking the rest of the formation. And my throat mic had become disconnected, and in bending down to put it back together again, I dropped my upper part of my body below the top of the airplane, and in so doing was not there when the anti-aircraft exploded and blew the top off the airplane. So, but for a flip of a coin and a navigator's tug on my pants leg, two reasons why I shouldn't be here. And my life has been filled with many experiences similar to that.
Were you concerned about your safety when you were flying?
Keep talking about, oh, it must have been dangerous. I didn't even think about it. It didn't even cross my mind. We went in for a crash landing between Saint-Trond, Belgium, and Merville, France, right on the border. And I could speak German because I was a pre-med student at the university, and I had taken a lot of quarter times in pre-med. So the guys put me in the airplane in the right position so I could get out first in case we were in German territory. I jumped out of the airplane, the exit right by the tail wheel of the aircraft, and I hollered at the guy with a motorcycle going by, and he was a Brit, and I said, "Where are we?" And he says, "Patton went through here this past week, so you're in friendly territory." Well, we had come in with the wheels up. We all lined up on the body of the airplane, holding successive heads down the line to keep from getting bumped. We jumped on some transportation, went back and flew a couple more missions before the winter. But when I was 22, I didn't even think or worry about death or crashing or getting shot down. If it had come, I could have handled it. It would have been accepted as part of the responsibility. It is quite a different feeling today, but when you count the numbers of ground pounders, the numbers of airmen that were risking their lives daily, they talk about going to have an invasion in France. Guys in the Air Force went on an invasion every single day. They were in enemy territory. We didn't think anything about it, except for this one guy, Hess, who was a sick call expert.
When you were flying, Were you aware of the mortality rates of the 8th Air Force bomber crews?
We didn't have TV news in those days. I can remember one time when we were made quite aware of the fact that one of our crews had been shot down. We had 8 out of 10 of the 601st Squadron of the 398th Bomb Group, where the bombs dropped and got in the prop wash of the lead ship. They banged noses together, took 8 out of the 10 airplanes down. One guy who had adopted a dog from England, and he built a house out of the B-17 plastic nose. So the dog slept in that house. He was one of the guys that was missing, and so we had at least 6 or 7 volunteers to take care of him. But no, we didn't think about those things. We didn't have somebody talking about the greatest generation. We didn't have anybody talking about there's so many killed tonight, so many killed today, so many killed. So it wasn't a pressing thought.
Did you ever see any mid-air collisions when you were flying in formation?
No, but I had my pilot when I was standing up there. He says, "You want to really know how close we are?" He took his wing and he went boom, 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 boom. Tapped his wingtip on the airplane next to him so that they would know how close we are. But we were the highest airfield in England. And the fact we were the highest, when there was a fog, we would have guys from every Air Force unit landing at our air base. So it was pretty confusing. But nothing, still, this is it, that's the war. The war is on. I still have that same feeling today. I'm not complaining about having done it, or any, excuse me, any of those things, and I had no feeling of pride or remorse. It was just there, do it. Your government says so. Your country says so. Go ahead and do it. If you don't like the commanding officer, so what? It was just a general acceptance.
Tell me about a typical mission day.
Oh, we would get up too early in the morning and go and have what was called mess call. It was pretty good food. And go and get on a particular airplane. It was all at the board where the target was. All the information was given to us. It's been a long time since I've done this, so I don't remember it too well, but that was called the ready room. And we would go and get our assignments. So we got this, one day we got the assignment, so I wasn't flying with my crew anymore, which was a momentous day. And take off, and we would fly around in circles for an assembly point. And the one that was the leader of the airplane, of the air group, had the wheels down. So you could identify them, and you'd pick up, and as soon as you'd get all 10 of your little stragglers together, you'd take off for the target. And then we'd go over and we'd bomb. And it was interesting being a bombardier. If we were going to be flying here in Minneapolis, you'd bomb the state capitol, just as a thought to visualize. You had a device on the bomb site, Norden bomb site, where you could roll the compass, or not the compass, but the telescope backwards and shoot almost horizontally. And you'd start locating. You had 2 crosshairs. And you could get this one. It was being driven down at the same speed of the airplane that was going over the ground. And we would go at whatever it was, 160, 150. And it was my duty as a bombardier to make sure those crosshairs stayed on the target. And we had two wheels adjustment devices to make the speed of the telescope be faster or slower, and left and right. I had control of the airplane because all of the airplane controls were put into the bomb sight. So I could take the bomb sight with two hands like this, and I could turn the airplane. I did that when we had a long run one time. And the pilot says, "What are you doing?" Got a little angry, and I said, "This flying is nothing to this that you're doing out there. You ought to be down here." And so anyhow, we'd be flying these towards this target, and I would adjust the large adjustments this way. I would adjust the easier adjustments up and down with the equipment, and as soon as the crosshairs meted, like with the bomb bay doors open, because we had to be trimmed, the airplane had to be trimmed, and as soon as there's one indices, it was preset according to altitude, airspeed, ground speed. The one indices was like this. The one I was controlling was like this. As soon as this one came down the air, boom, that was it. There wasn't, we had all kinds of literature and technical device descriptions about the Northern bomb sight, but like me or like the other guys who were bombardiers, we knew that we had a piece of equipment. Honeywell, Minneapolis was a pilot, autopilot, hooked up with a Northern bomb sight, which from the east somewhere. And we just had all of our faith wrapped up in that. 10 guys on every airplane depended on the Northern bomb sight. And we knew it would work. It was trimmed up and aimed at the target. But the technicalities, I've got a book that describes the whole thing, but I haven't looked at it since 1945.
How much technical training did you have to go through to use the Northern bomb sight?
We had to know the background, the origin of it, what it was capable of doing, the fact that we were setting we didn't even set the information in the bomb sight. They had technicians on the ground to set the altitude, airspeed, wind, ground speed, and everything that was concerned in the operation of the bomb sight by technicians. So all I had to do was sit up there in the nose of the airplane. We had a, speaking of city, in the nose, the front of the nose of the airplane on the takeoff runway at Nut Hampstead, which is halfway from London to Cambridge in England. We'd take off and head this way, and there was a church right down there. And right in the top of the church was the cross. It looked like it was standing up like this. We'd come to the edge, and I would sit like this, and I'd say, here comes that cross again. And then I could sit back down. Again, it was kind of humorous at the time, but it felt like we were real close. But we didn't get engulfed in all the technical. We were just the operators.
Were you required to destroy the Northern bomb sight in the event of a bailout or a crash landing?
We had that, and they said to destroy the site rather than send it down with an airplane. So that was our very first responsibility. I never had an opportunity to do that, but I would have done that. It was we hung on them. I mean, the whole thing was directed on the bomb sight. No real technical training, just ordinary ground instruction about this thing.
Tell me about the chin turret and the other guns in the nose of your B-17.
It was a pair of 50 caliber machine guns, which could go 180 degrees this way and up and down. I don't know how many, but I had 2 cheek guns. The navigator had one and I had the other, and the Bendix chin turret, 2 more, which were formidable so far as the enemy is concerned, because we have photographs of airplanes being shot down with the Bendix.
Did you ever encounter any German jets?
Not at the end of the war, not at the time I was there. We didn't. We shot at a few. In fact, the one fighter jet, ME-109, came over the fort. It was almost like he was on a mission of his own death, and he flew right down the formation. And my upper turret gunner, who was the let's see, he would have been the engineer, upper turret right between the pilot and the co-pilot. And he had a pair of 50 caliber machine guns. Those are now in the Smithsonian Institute for having been the first or the last knocker downer of a Messerschmitt. And that was quite, that was recognized as being a completion of a mission, shooting the last one down.
What do you remember about your last mission, though at the time you couldn't have known it would be your last mission, as the war ended before you could finish your tour?
I don't remember. They were all grouped together. They were all done the same. They all prepared the same. We were all ready for the same. So we weren't counting like they do today. You had a job, your boss says, go do the job, get it done, come back, have supper, have breakfast, go do the job, over and over. And I fortunately was there only during the time when the required missions were 35. Some guys were there when they were 25, when they were a lot more dangerous. I remember Ploesti oil raid. It was a good friend of mine, a kid by the name of Jim Bourne. He and I were good buddies in high school, as were Clyde and I. And he was on the Ploesti oil raid. They went at low altitude, and he was killed, and we lost him. But I haven't thought or talked about him for a long time.
How did you feel about the B-17 versus the B-24?
We had a story about the B-17 and the B-24, that the B-24 was the airplane that the B-17 was shipped overseas in to make sure the B-17 got there. We felt superior for no reason, but we had a lower casualty rate and more airworthy from a standpoint of letting the pilot and the crew and all the guys on the crew feel more comfortable in that airplane.
Tell me about the time you had to crash land.
One was shot out, one engine shot out, and the other engine was windmilling. A third engine was pulling, and the fourth engine was frozen, right in position. So we had one engine. And Joe, or Starkey, called back and he said, we're going to go in and take a wheels up landing. So our duty as the crew members were to line up down the middle of the flight area, down the crosswalk between the bomb bays, and hold the head of the man ahead of you. And race your own. I was the biggest one on the crew. So I had the whole load, all 8 of us, facing the back of the airplane. And when we came in, we were supposed to stay in position until we landed. That's when I stuck my head out the airplane and asked them where we were. And that's when Patton had come to our rescue.
Tell me about the oxygen checks you had to do at altitude.
B-17 had a very efficient oxygen system going to each position, pilot, co-pilot, and all the rest. And it was my duty as a bombardier, because I didn't have to do anything till the last 10 minutes going in, was to have an oxygen check periodically, certain time, 15 minutes, and each crew member would report in numerical order as to how he was doing so far as that was concerned. So we kept our eyes and minds on one another through this system. It was kind of interesting because some guys would forget what they were supposed to do at a certain time. So you'd hear tail gunner, click, 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 tail gunner, click, 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 getting ready to send somebody back there. And a moment later it'd come on. Oh, I'm okay, I just forgot. I mean, just sitting there in a B-17 being shot at, dropping bombs, blowing the earth up, killing people. Oh, I forgot. That experience was the nonchalance that all of the guys had, which was helpful so far as our whole demeanor was concerned.
Tell me about your heated flight suits and how you dealt with the extreme cold.
We had blue bunnies, which was a one-piece heated, electrically heated, like a heated seat in a car, which we put on under the leather, fur-lined leather pants and jacket. Gloves were just ordinary silk gloves, keep your hands from freezing. If you were a bombardier, you had to keep your hands warm until you took hold of the knobs. And the other guys, and the oxygen would come on at 10,000 feet. After the war was over, I went skiing out in Vail, Colorado. We were up at 12,000. No oxygen. I didn't feel any differently, but evidently 10 was the number that they wanted. Easy to remember, easy to manipulate. But hands, feet, flight boots. In fact, one guy that jumped out of the airplane at the end of one mission, when the mission was over, I should say, and he was shot down. He tied his two flight boots together by the strings, tied them to his jacket, and jumped out, and he landed on the ground faster than he thought he should, and the strings broke and the boots went one way or the other. So this was no advantage to him. There was another story about guys doing this jump out thing, about the left-handed guy who's supposed to pull the right ripcord, but he was left-handed. He actually ripped his jacket with his bare hand. I was looking for it because his handedness was not for the other hand release. So I didn't have many experiences so far as bailing out or anything, and I never got cold. I was a Minnesota boy, had an extra layer of fat on me, I guess.
Were you given any training or advice regarding escape and evasion after bailing out?
They told us to, if you bail out and you're captured and you can get away, or you can get away before you're captured, one thing to remember specifically, that the people in the foreign countries do not switch the fork and the spoon from hand to hand. They cut, and they don't eat with their right hand. They eat with fork, knife, cut, eat. Don't do it the other way, because that'll give you away as being an American or a foreigner. But outside of that, we heard those things. They were fresh in our minds, but right now they're not too fresh in my mind, because it was a long time ago.
What was your impression when you were first introduced to the B-17?
Just that we were enthralled. We looked at it, and we didn't have a lot of feeling. Again, it's that attitude. There's a B-7, it's a good-looking airplane, period. was the attitude of most guys. I don't know about whether pilots were more interested or navigators or what. Personally, I don't. I do remember that one B-17 crashed in downtown Sioux City, Iowa, when we were in training, and the wife of the bombardier was a good friend of ours. There were about 6 of us hung around together, and his dinner was being made, and the crash came in right to the house next door to where his wife was. And we came to the door as a group to tell her the news, and she just shut the door and got back on a transportation, a train at the time, back to outside of Brooklyn, someplace in that area. So we, as a group, she had dinner already. And here was this beautiful dinner sitting at the table. The 6 of us sat down and had dinner at his expense. And there wasn't it wasn't a mean feeling. It was a practical response to a situation. But it's funny. I used to tell the kids when I was teaching school, well, as you get older, you'll have memories. You'll remember all the good things. But sometimes they were traumatic, and you would remember those things too. A good friend of mine was on the first crew I trained with, was from outstate Minnesota, and I signed him up as a partner. We stayed in a hotel room near Piccadilly Circus, which was the nasty part of London. And we spent the night, but going into the place, I signed my name, and he was also, I was Lieutenant Butts, and he was Lieutenant Kurtz. There, I just remembered his name, which is a fun thing to do. And I came to the door of our room, and it was locked. I tried the key, and I couldn't get in. And so I looked around, and the guy came to the door in a bathrobe. So he was in the bedroom with his babe. There was a screen. I could see this pair of girls' legs, naked. And he says, "I'm busy." I said, "We'll get another room." So we went down and got there. That was it. Other than the fact that 10 o'clock when the curfew came, there'd be these hookers running around, and they come up and grab you by the arm. One of them got so bad and wouldn't let go of my friend Kurtz. I tossed a quarter on the ground, or not 20 pence or whatever it was, a coin. I says, "Here, you can go home now. Leave my buddy alone." But you know, that's the way we treated. If you didn't want it, you didn't want it, you didn't take it. Attitude.
Did you correspond with your wife while you were overseas?
I've got every letter we wrote to each other, and it was in a normal, loving way. Just easy to say, "I love you, and you mean so much, and our son is coming," and he came on September 4th. So it was a normal reaction to that. Interesting about his number, the draft number came up for, what would that be, Korean War. And he was the right age. So they were going to announce it on the radio. And the date to be announced was September 14th. He delayed it some time between the 4th and the 10th, and Steve's birthday was September 4th. Otherwise, if it had been 4th, he'd be #1 on the draft. He was at the university, probably could have gotten around it. But it's another one of those coincidental, exciting.
Where were you, and what do you remember about VE Day?
I was in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, with my Uncle Gard and my Aunt Min, my dad's sister. Minerva, B-U-T-T. They didn't have an S on the end, so my mother scratched S on all the documents, which made it sound a little better. And I was in downtown Sioux Falls, and I had just hitchhiked back because May was pregnant with Steve. I didn't know for sure when he'd be born. I had about a 3-day layoff, so I got out on the highway and I hitchhiked to Minneapolis with a guy who was the owner and operator of a big company out here in Eden Prairie. I don't remember the name of it. And Minerva packed me a lunch, and I came home, but I saw the crowds in Sioux Falls having a ball, screaming and hollering, just like the pictures of yesterday. I didn't partake in that part because I had a job to do. I had to go back and see. May's stay was at our son was 8 pounds, and it was 8 days in the hospital. And it was free because he was a guy who had done caudal deliveries, this injection. And he delivered and everything went fine. Didn't cost, so he cost $1 a pound. 8 pounds of life.
To what do you attribute your survival of the war?
My survival, the Lord Jesus Christ. The close calls that I had, the experiences that I had. We had guys that were walking through propeller blades, not being aware of things. I told you a couple of close calls that I had, but I knew my wife was a saved lady, her folks, my folks. We all recognized the supreme power. And every mission I took off, every flight I took off, I didn't say a long prayer about me. I just said, Lord, bring me back. And that's all it took. And he did. All these guys that I've talked about, near and dear to me, I wish I could see them one more time. But I can't until some of them went to heaven. I know they did. That was my attitude.
We got married August 8th, 1944.
Now, when you got married, you knew that Don was going overseas, didn't you?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, what happened was that he was commissioned and he came home for 5 days. And in that 5 days, within that 5 days, my mother arranged a wedding for about 400 people. We had a friend of ours was a cateress. She decorated the church basement like a flower garden with artificial grass on the floor. And I had 5 bridesmaids. We got them all dressed. It was an all-white wedding, and it was beautiful. But it was hot. It was like in our church, it wasn't air-conditioned. And by the time the ceremony was over, my hair under the veil was hanging down over my eyes. Don's winter uniform, because he just gotten commissioned, didn't have time to get a summer uniform, was perspiration all around the collar, and that's the way it was. But you know what? We didn't even care. And then we went to the Leamington Hotel to stay overnight, and that was not air conditioned. So it was hot. It was a hot evening.
Now, when you sent him off overseas, what was that like? I mean, you knew he was going to be gone for a while. You knew he was in combat. So what kind of apprehensions did you have about that?
Well, you know, when you're young, you don't think about those things. If it happened to me now with one of my sons, it would break my heart. But then it didn't really sink in, or else I just figured he'd be taken care of. But I saw his mother, and it was hard on her. She cried.
Now, did you purposely read or not read the newspapers to hear war stories and all that, or did you follow the war closely, or what? How did you handle the media?
I read it all. But we did have one very scary time. I was pregnant, and my mom and dad's wedding anniversary was May 12th. And Don had written, we wrote back and forth every day. We got a letter every day. And during that time, it was the celebration for my folks' anniversary was on a Sunday. I was working full-time downtown Minneapolis, and I'd call home and see if there was any mail. And for 5 days, I didn't receive any mail. And the letter before that had told me that he was going on extended missions, so I thought he was gone. And it was so tough on my dad and mother that the celebration was really kind of ruined. And of course, then on Monday, I got 5 letters. The timing was off. But as far as thinking about the danger and everything, I think when you're young, you just go with the flow, and you don't think about it being that perilous. At least I didn't. And all my friends, they all had boyfriends or husbands overseas. So we kind of paddled around together, the girls, and did our fun things and worked full time.
How did your faith sustain you during that time?
It's always sustained me. And I claimed the promise.
Tell me about Don's homecoming.
I was working downtown in the North Star building, and he walked in on me. And that's how it was. And of course, the joy is incomprehensible.
Don Butts passed away on June 10th, 2010 at the age of 87, and his wife May passed away several years later at the age of 91. Their stories live on here at Air Combat Journal. If you've enjoyed these oral histories, check out the other interviews on this Air Combat Journal YouTube channel. Also, please support this channel by subscribing. Subscribing is easy. Just click on the small subscribe button. As a subscriber, you'll also get notifications each time I post a new video. Thank you for watching, and as always, I welcome your comments. Godspeed.